Very good afternoon to you. Let me just check with my technical operations team. Noel, are we live and working and good to go with Dr. Amy on the line from the States? Paul, can I get the thumbs up from you if you can hear me? Great stuff. We are live. Very, very welcome along. I'm delighted to say we have a very special lineup today. My name is Kenn Joyce, and thank you for joining me. We represent Alienated Children First. Our website is alienated.ie. For those of you that haven't already discovered that, you'll find lots of useful links in that to all things parental alienation. If you are suffering from, or know somebody is suffering from, or have an interest in the subject, then please do log on and join up. We're just a group of parents, basically. We don't have any money or funding, so we need professionals and legislators and sponsorship to stop the horrendous abuse that is parental alienation. We abhor all forms of abuse. All victims, male and female, young children and adults. We have men and women in our group who were, in some instances, previously alienated children themselves. Some are parents who have been reunited, and others, sadly, are those who have yet to reunite, with which our guest today, Dr. Amy Baker, will hopefully be able to help. We have to specify again that we abhor all abuse, including the false allegations of parental alienation, sometimes used in courts today as a defense for the indefensible. Domestic abuse is another thing we abhor, and of course, parental alienation often is used as a form of domestic abuse, in as much as a husband or a wife who uses parental alienation to hurt their spouse is effectively turning parental alienation into a form of domestic abuse. It's something which happens to both genders, male and female, equally, as we know, and sadly the victims in every instance are the children, and on too many occasions one of the parents of those children too. So we're presenting you with this series of webinars, speaking with top academics from around the world, leading universities, professional bodies, and we want to try and get the authentic voice of the child from those experts, so that we can understand what this must be like for a kid, and how can we address it, and how can we hopefully fix it. There are many names for parental alienation, such as pathological parenting, parentectomy, but put very simply, whatever you call it, it is child abuse. And it is a series of now recognizable behaviors which constitute what has a common or garden name of parental alienation. They come under that label, but it is parental alienation itself is not a diagnosable disease any more than a psychopath. Everyone knows what a psychopath is, but if you look up psychopathy, you will find that it is not a diagnosable disease either. So it's one of those ones that falls a little between the crack. But we hope that through our efforts, professionals, healthcare professionals, legal professionals, the judiciary, barristers, solicitors, psychologists involved in the assistance of parental alienation will gain a broader and better perspective of what parental alienation is. And as we heard from Dr. Craig Childress in one of our earlier webinars, the damage that parental alienation does is the same as any kind of child abuse, including that of sexual abuse. So if you imagine that what is happening to a child who is being parentally alienated will have the same lifelong effects as though that child were being sexually abused by the perpetrator. It's something that simply has to stop. Health providers and Irish and international case law recognizes this abuse by a set of behaviors which are the result of emotional or coercive control, manipulation of our trusting children. And it's just, we've got to do something about it. To help us with that, we are joined today by Dr. Amy Baker. Dr. Amy is a nationally recognized expert in parent-child relationships, especially children of divorce, parental alienation, and emotional abuse of children. Dr. Baker has a PhD in developmental psychology from Teachers College of Columbia University. Amy is the author or co-author of no less than 9 books on the subject and over 120 peer-reviewed published articles. Her books include titles like Working with Alienated Children and Their Families and Adult Children of Parental Alienation Syndrome, Breaking the Ties That Bind. Amy is the author of the 7 Identifying Factors of Parental Alienation, and with Dr. Bill Burnett, who we previously had on one of our webinars as well, she also created the 5-factor model, which now psychologists, judges, barristers can all use as a form of diagnosis for parental alienation. With great pleasure, may I introduce you to Dr. Amy Baker.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully that is working. If there's some problem, please let me know. That looks
good. That looks good.
All right. So the title of my talk is Improving Interactions with Your Alienated Child. And I am Amy Baker, parental alienation author, researcher, and coach. All right. So there's 2 main topics that I'm going to talk about today. And I'm just going to spend a second just trying to move this panel around so I can see. Okay. Okay, so I'm having a bit of a technical issue. Okay, so what I want to do in my presentation today is talk about 2 main topics. The first is ways in which targeted parents can improve their parenting to be more effective parents and be more responsive to their children in all sorts of situations, so that targeted parents can, as much as possible, protect their children from becoming alienated. And the second topic is how to reach out to an adult alienated child. So let's turn right away to topic 1, which is how to protect your relationship with your child from alienation. And there's 5 relationship protection strategies that I'm going to talk about. How to enhance the attachment with your child, how to not take the bait, how to foster 3 particular values that are relevant for alienation, how to teach critical thinking skills, and how to invite criticism. Okay, so the first one is how to enhance the attachment with your child. So alienation works when a parent is able to convince the child that the targeted parent is unsafe, unloving, and unavailable. Safe, loving, and available is the opposite, and they are the 3 essential experiences of a secure attachment. And to the extent that your child experiences you as safe, loving, and available, the less likely it is that the other parent can manipulate the child to believe that you're unsafe, unloving, and unavailable. And I want to explain how to do this. And I want to just pause for a moment and say that I'm giving my talk this morning as if I'm speaking to a targeted parent, but I understand that there's many professionals in the audience listening today. And so you'll just have to do the sort of mental, work to frame it as what you might say to a targeted parent. Okay, so the first way to enhance the attachment is to ensure that all of your interactions are loving. And what I mean is that it's not so much what you do as a parent, but how you do it that creates in the child a feeling that you are safe, loving, and available. For example, if your toddler says to you, "I want ice cream for breakfast," you could say, "That's ridiculous. Who eats ice cream for breakfast?" Or, "Who told you to ask me for ice cream for breakfast? Did your other parent put you up to this? You know that's not what we do." Now, you could talk to your child that way, and of course, it would be appropriate to set the limit and not let your child eat ice cream for breakfast. But how you say no affects the child's experience of the attachment relationship. So you could say, "That's ridiculous. Who put you up to this? Why would you think that?" But if you do that, if you talk to your child that way, you are conveying to the child you're stupid or you're wrong or you're bad. And nobody likes that, right? Why talk to your child in a way that makes them feel badly about themselves? And if you do, they'll also feel badly about you. So instead, I recommend saying something like, oh, don't you wish ice cream were a healthy breakfast choice? You can have ice cream later, and now you can choose between pancakes and waffles for breakfast. So you can join the child in the wish. You're not humiliating your child for asking for ice cream for breakfast. And at the same time, you're setting an appropriate limit. You're not getting out the bowl and ice cream scooper and dishing up Rocky Road for breakfast, but you're saying no in a very relationship preserving way. Now, as an opposite example, let's say you want to give your teenager $100. You could crumple up the bill and throw it at your child and say, here, take your stupid money, all right? Or you could hand it to your child with love in your heart and say, you know, I've been saving this money and I was thinking about the right time to give this to you. And I just really feel like today would be a good day. So here's $100. I want you to have it. In both scenarios, the child is getting $100, but one is tainted with the parent being unloving and the other is enhanced by the parent being loving. So these are two examples where how you say something matters as much as what you say. And as much as possible, targeted parents need to be loving in how they speak to their child, always. Another aspect of enhancing the attachment involves taking what I call blah moments and turning them into ah moments. So you can think of a blah moment as, you know, the parent's just sitting there eating breakfast, or, you know, if you're the parent, you're sitting there on the couch watching a movie with your child. It's nothing special, nothing, you know, you're just hanging out with your child. And if you left it at that, later, when the other parent says to the child, oh, you don't really have fun with that other parent, you don't feel close and connected, you don't have that much of a relationship, it'll be easy for the child to go along with that idea because the memory traces of the time that you're spending with your child are thin. You can think of it like a fragile thread that could easily be, you know, cut or blown away, just gone. But if you elevate the moment from a blah moment into an ah moment, you can think about it like wrapping the thread, strengthening that memory trace. So when the other parent tries to convince the child that the child doesn't really have fun with you, doesn't really enjoy your company, doesn't have special moments with you, it'll be a little bit harder for that false idea to take hold within the child, because instead of having just this thin memory trace of a blah moment, it will feel like a more sturdy memory trace of a positive moment. So there are several ways to wrap the thread, so to speak, to strengthen the experience and enhance the memory of the positives in the relationship. So the first is through touch. So if you're just hanging out on the couch, make sure to tousle your kids' hair or give them a shoulder squeeze or rub their feet if they like that, or whatever you can do to add that extra layer of warmth and connection with your child. So touch, a loving touch, is one way to elevate a moment. The second way is through eye contact. If you're just sitting there having breakfast with your kid, make sure to make eye contact and have a loving look on your face. Don't get buried in your phone or reading the newspaper. Sure, it's fine to do those things sometimes, but make sure that you're paying attention, that you are emotionally available to your child. And you can do that through having a loving facial expression matched with eye contact. Eye contact increases the intensity of a moment, so it elevates the moment to feel more special. And the third way to wrap the thread is through verbalizations. You can say to your child, I just love being with you, or I'm so proud of who you are. You're such an awesome kid. You do have to mean it. It has to come from your heart. It can't be empty praise or lavish and extravagant statements like you're the most wonderful person in the whole world, because that's not going to be believable for the child. So you want to speak from your heart to your child. All right, so those are three ways to elevate a blah moment into a more meaningful feeling of connection between you and your child. You can touch your child, you can look at your child with a loving look, and you can make loving verbalizations. And all of those together can help inoculate your child from becoming alienated. and or preventing mildly alienated child from progressing from mild to moderate alienation. The next strategy that I want to talk about is not to take the bait, okay? And what I mean is alienated kids often behave very provocatively. They can be uncooperative, negative, contemptuous, surly, and arrogant. They can really push your buttons. But if you respond with anger or depression, normal human reactions when your child is being turned against you, but if you react that way with your child, you are inadvertently reinforcing the lie. So the lie is that you're unsafe, unloving, and unavailable. And then if your child behaves in a provocative way and you respond by screaming at your child or hitting your child or sobbing, then the child can say, gee, that other parent is right. This parent is a creep or a monster or a loser. We don't have any fun together. All we do is fight. And we don't want the targeted parent to inadvertently reinforce the lie. In other words, let's say your child accused you of beating him when he was a baby. And let's say you never hit your child, not even spanking. You're just totally nonviolent. But your kid is pushing your buttons and in your face with what you perceive to be obnoxious, difficult, and unpleasant behavior. And then you react by slapping your child. Well, now you've made the lie a truth. And let's be clear, targeted parents are held to a different standard. That is the reality. Targeted parents can't afford to take the bait and yell at their child, as depicted here. The other parent can engage in some really egregious behavior. If they're an alienator, the kids are going to prefer that parent and believe what that parent says and take that parent's perspective and see the world through that parent's eyes. And no matter what the flaws are of that parent, the kids are going to cut that parent slack. That parent can miss special events or be a cheapskate or be dishonest. They can be mean or lazy or whatever. But if they're a successful alienator and they're succeeding in their alienation efforts, then the kids are going to minimize and or deny that parent's flaws. And at the same time, they're not going to cut you as the targeted parent any slack whatsoever. You don't have the luxury of taking the bait when your child behaves in a way that you find unpleasant. So I want to teach you, if you're a targeted parent, and if you're a professional, I want to teach you this skill so that you can teach it to targeted parents. What to do when your kid is pushing your buttons so that you don't take the bait. Okay, so here are some suggestions. These are just basic cognitive behavioral coping concepts to help you not get flooded with negative emotions. When you become negatively emotionally over-aroused with sadness or anger or fear, it's hard, if not impossible, to be emotionally available to your child. So here are some things you can do to ensure that you don't react based on negative emotions. First, you can always say to your child, let's deal with this later. For example, if you ask your child to put their cell phone down and your child doesn't do what you ask, there is no rule that dictates that you have to address the situation in the moment. It is really okay to say to your child, boy, I am not happy that you're not putting your phone down. We're going to deal with this later. This is by far a better strategy than letting your emotions get the best of you. And then you may make a pretty big mistake. If you grab the cell phone out of your child's hands, you might scratch your child might fall down and bump his head, and you could end up with a physical abuse investigations on your hands. There is no rule that you have to deal with every parenting situation in the moment. Second, you can even say, let's deal with this later to yourself and schedule a time to process something that's going on so that it doesn't take you out of the moment with your child. Third, remember to engage in positive, encouraging self-talk. Try to avoid catastrophizing language like this is the worst thing that ever happened or I can't handle this. Try to remind yourself that you're strong and capable and resourceful, and you can and will deal with whatever comes your way. Fourth, I'm doing it right now. Remember to take some deep breaths. It can calm the central nervous system down and help you stay calm and emotionally regulated. And finally, if you feel that a situation is not going well with your child, remove yourself from the situation. go to the bathroom, splash some cold water on your face, and give yourself a pep talk. All right, so now I want to offer some other suggestions, all falling under the category of don't take the bait. And this is for what to do when your child is very upset with you and behaving in a way that's very unpleasant. I have lots of targeted parents tell me that, my kid is rude and disrespectful, like in this picture here. I need to do something about it. That's my job as a parent. I have to give my child feedback about their behavior when they're behaving in a, uncivilized manner. So before I offer you this next tool, I want to offer a suggestion, which is to avoid all labels. I don't believe it's ever helpful for somebody to refer to somebody else as toxic or abusive or nasty or disrespectful or rude. It's demeaning to the child, it's demoralizing to the child, it's humiliating for the child, and it doesn't help foster a feeling of closeness between the parent and child. I want to be clear. I'm not saying it's a free-for-all. You're a human being and you have a right to have integrity and to not have somebody treat you in a way that you find very unpleasant. But you can't, in my opinion, start with the negative feedback, such as, how dare you talk to me that way, or go to your room and don't come out unless you can be pleasant. None of that, in my opinion, makes sense, because if your child is yelling at you or cursing or spitting or kicking or doing something else that you find very unpleasant, it's most likely because your child is upset. And I believe you have to start by acknowledging that your child is upset and that you care. That's what creates a feeling of connection. Then you address the unpleasant behavior. So what I recommend is you start by acknowledging that the child is upset by saying something like, wow, you're really upset right now. I can tell, and I really want to understand what's going on. Then you explain in a non-pejorative fashion what the child is doing that's uncomfortable or unpleasant for you, without any negative labels attached to the behavior. So you might say something like, you're talking in a tone of voice that's very distracting to me. Or you could say, your voice is of such a high volume that it's hurting my ears. Or your cursing at me really doesn't feel good for me. Or I really don't want to be spit at. So you're describing something that is uncomfortable or unpleasant for you, but not in a way that will make the child feel bad. What you want to do is provide neutral feedback. I don't want to be cursed at, or I don't want to be yelled at. And then you end this with an invitation. The invitation is for the child to tell you what's going on in a more pleasant way. So I'm going to demonstrate the whole thing from start to finish. Let's use the example of the child yelling at you. You would say, wow, kiddo, you are really upset and I want to understand what's going on. You're speaking really loudly and the volume is bothering my ears. Could you please say it again in a quieter voice? This strategy is designed to help the child feel that you care, that you are safe, that you're loving, that you're available. So this is what can help protect the relationship with the child when your child is coming at you with a lot of anger and hostility. Let's assume that your child does share a complaint with you, and that complaint is mostly, if not entirely, false. The examples here: you stole my money, my college money, you beat me when I was a baby, you're mean to mommy or daddy. I'm going to teach you now what's called the 5 steps. It doesn't really matter what the complaint is. If the child's complaint is untrue, then the targeted parent is likely to respond by saying something like, why would you say that? You know that's not true. Why would you believe that? That's ridiculous. Who told you that? Did your other parent tell you that? Any of those statements are unproductive because they're defensive and unkind. If you say to a child, how could you believe such a thing? You're saying to the child, you're an idiot and a fool. If you say to a child, you know that's not true, you're basically calling the child a liar. And so it's highly unlikely to resolve a conflict with the child if the child accuses you of something and you respond with a defensive, that's not true statement. I've never heard of a situation where a parent responds that way and the child says, gee, thanks for explaining that to me. Now I'm not mad anymore. All right, so I've taken away from parents the thing that you want to do. because as a human being, you want to defend yourself if you're being accused of something that's mostly, if not entirely, untrue. So now I want to teach you the 5 steps, which is what to do instead of defending yourself. I'm going to name each step, I'm going to explain it, and then I'm going to demonstrate it. The first step is called gratitude, and this means telling your child that you're glad that the child is sharing a complaint with you. Now, most people do not feel happy when their child complains. No one really thinks, yippee, my child's complaining about me. That does not happen. So I want to explain to you why you should not just express gratitude, but actually feel gratitude. I'm going to start with the premise that all children have grievances about their parents. All parents hurt, frustrate, and disappoint their children. And so the question you can ask yourself is, who do I want my child complaining about me to? Do I want my child complaining to the other parent if I've done something, or my child thinks I've done something that hurt or bothered or frustrated him? Or do I want him to bring the complaint to me? I think targeted parents understand that it's not really helpful when the child complains to the other parent, because the other parent, if they're an alienator, is likely to fan the flames of the child's discontent rather than help the child resolve the conflict and work it through. So if you're a targeted parent and your child is complaining to you, you should be feeling grateful that at least the child is coming to you with the complaint. Likewise, another alternative that's not as good as your child coming to you with a complaint is your child shutting down. Many targeted parents of severely alienated kids have had the experience of the kid basically saying, screw you, I'm not going to talk to you, and shutting them out, going up into their room for the whole visit, putting on their earbuds, and basically not paying any attention to the parent and not investing any energy in the relationship. Those parents are, desperate to hear from their kid. What's on their mind? What is it? What have I done? What are you upset about? So when your child complains to you, even though you don't necessarily enjoy it, you could feel grateful that at least your child is talking to you and at least the child is bringing the complaint to you. A helpful analogy might be if your young child skins his knee at the playground and he runs to you to kiss his bloody knee and make it better. Do you really want to kiss a bloody knee? Probably not. It's kind of gross, but you wouldn't want your child bringing his bloody knee to somebody else, right? So a complaint about you from the child is sort of like the bloody knee. The child is bringing something to you that's not particularly pleasant, but it is acknowledging that there's a relationship and that you have the power to heal or at least work something through. And that's a really good place to start. Another way to think about this, just to continue with the idea about why you should feel grateful, is, if you've ever been single and you go out on a couple dates and the person is more into you than you're into them, and you don't want that 4th date and the person is asking, why, how come, what did I do? Come on, just tell me. I think intuitively you feel like, I can't be bothered. I don't want to invest any energy into explaining myself to this person. I'm done. And so you don't want to tell the person what they did wrong or what you didn't like, because you know that by investing energy into this relationship and explaining what's bothering you, you're pretty much giving the person hope that if they just fix those things that you'll want to be with them. But if you're truly done with the relationship, you're done. You don't want to fix anything. You don't want to move forward with that person. You don't want to invest energy and explain what you didn't like. And so, as long as your kids are bringing a complaint to you, they're telling you in so many words that they're not done, that they are still willing to invest energy in the relationship. And that's why you should feel grateful. Now I'm going to explain how to express gratitude. The first thing I want to say is that when you express gratitude to your child as step 1 of the 5 steps, you have to do so with energy in your voice, because that's part of you investing energy in the relationship. If you talk to your child in a blasé, nonchalant, or casual way, like, gee, thanks, you're conveying like, I don't really care. And you definitely don't want to do that. You want to convey to your child that you are invested in the relationship, that the relationship matters. The second thing I want to say about step 1, gratitude, is that it has to be 5 sentences in length. So it's not just, gee, thanks, because that's low key and it's too short. So here's how you express gratitude in 5 sentences. Let's take an example, a child named Chris. And let's take as an example, Chris's complaint is you beat me when I was a baby. But remember, this could work for any complaint that's mostly or entirely untrue. The complaint could be you stole my college money, you don't pay attention to me, you yell, you don't feed me food I like, you're a cheapskate, whatever. So you would say, Chris, thank you so much for telling me that you think I beat you when you were a baby. So the first sentence of the first step, gratitude, is to say the child's name, to say thank you, and to repeat the child's complaint using the child's words. So if the complaint is you beat me when I was a baby, you're not going to say, thanks for telling me that ridiculous idea that your other parent brainwashed you into believing. And you're not going to say, thank you for telling me you think I'm the worst person in the whole world ever, because that's not what the child said. You're going to repeat back the child's complaint using the child's words to show that you are listening, that you're paying attention. All right, but that's only one sentence. And remember that the gratitude step is supposed to be 5 sentences. So here's how you expand it into 5 sentences. I cherish our relationship, and I hope that I never hurt or frustrate or disappoint you, but I always want to know if you feel that I have. So I'm so grateful that you're letting me know what's on your mind. And you know what? It's easy to complain about someone behind their back. It takes courage to look me in the eye and tell me what's going on. And so I'm really proud of you today because I think you've been really brave. So step 1 is loaded with positive words like pride, cherish, appreciation, courage, bravery. You want this child to walk away from the experience feeling good about himself. And if you have any doubts about this, you can engage in a little thought experiment. Imagine that you have a boss and you say to your boss, hey boss, I'm kind of upset. I feel like you threw me under the bus at the staff meeting today. Now imagine if your boss responded to you by saying, what are you talking about? That's ridiculous. Now imagine if your boss said to you, thank you so much for telling me that you think I threw you under the bus at the staff meeting this morning. I value you as an employee so much. I'm so glad you're telling me that I did something or you think I did something that didn't feel good for you. You know what? It's easy to complain about the boss behind my back. You've got guts coming in here and telling me to my face. That's awesome. Imagine how you would feel under those 2 scenarios. And I think that you would prefer to be spoken to, and you would feel better about yourself, and you would feel better about your boss if the boss spoke to you with the 5 sentences of high intensity gratitude. And that is what you want for your child, to feel good about himself when he's with you. That doesn't mean that you always agree with him or always give him what he wants, but it means that you are always loving and respectful. And not only will he feel good about himself, but he'll feel good about you. And that's what you want. Okay. And my point is that you want to create a positive reinforcement for the child for complaining to you so that your child will do it again. If you make the child feel ashamed or ridiculed, or you respond with anger and hostility, the child may not want to bring the next complaint to you. All right, so now we're going to go to step 2, which is called compassion. This is also 5 sentences of high intensity speech. The purpose of compassion is to show your child that you're paying attention to her emotional state in the moment. So when your child is telling you, you beat me when I was a baby, is the child saying it with anger? You beat me when I was a baby. Or is your child saying it with sadness? You beat me when I was a baby. Or with confusion. You beat me when I was a baby? I want you to pay attention to what your child is feeling as she's telling you what's bothering her. And you're going to do that by paying attention to 4 things. The words she's using, her tone of voice, her facial expression, and her body posture. And you're going to pay attention to these 4 things, and you're going to take an educated guess as to what your child is feeling And then you're going to reflect that back to your child with 5 sentences of high energy speech. Now, I want to warn you, this is very hard. And it's hard because when we are attacked, if your child is coming at you with a lot of anger, we want to defend ourselves and we go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. We don't go into compassion mode when we feel attacked. So I have a theory about this. This is just my speculation. I want to be clear. My belief is that our ancestors back on the African plain, when they were being chased by a lion, were probably not thinking, oh, poor lion, what's he going to have for dinner tonight? Those people who felt compassion while being attacked, they were probably distracted. They weren't as focused on escaping, and they probably stumbled and got eaten by the lion. Those are not our ancestors, right? If they got eaten by the lion, they didn't procreate, so we're not their descendants. We're descended from people who went into fight, flight, or freeze mode, and they saved themselves. They weren't thinking about the lion. They had tunnel vision. They were focused on survival. All their energy and resources were channeled into surviving. There was nothing left over for compassion. Those are our descendants. It is in our DNA to feel defensive when we are attacked instead of feeling compassion. So luckily, there's a couple of things you can do to override the shutdown of compassion when you're feeling attacked by your child. The easiest thing is just to take a couple of deep breaths. This calms the central nervous system down, and it actually can get you out of fight, flight, or freeze mode. You can also say to yourself, my child is not a lion. My child's not going to eat me. This is a suffering child. She is hurt and upset. And those kinds of thoughts should allow you to pay attention to your child's words, her tone of voice, her facial expression, and her body posture. And you can place your feet firmly on the floor that literally and figuratively can ground you and help you not feel that you are in danger. All right, so now I'm going to demonstrate how to put this into practice with 5 sentences of high octane speech. Let's use the example again of the child named Chris, who thinks that you beat her when she was a baby and that Chris is very angry. So you would say, no wonder you're so angry. You think I beat you when you were a baby. And boy, I can see how angry you are feeling right now. I can tell from your tone of voice that you're feeling angry. You're speaking loudly and with an angry tone. I can see the anger in your face. You have a stern look on your face and your jaw's clenched, and I can see the anger in your body. You're standing there with your hands on your hips. You look like you're ready to go to battle. And of course, I don't have on this slide, but if the child is actually saying I'm angry, then you would start by saying, I can tell from the words you're using, you're telling me that you're angry. The purpose of this step is to communicate to your child, I am paying attention to your emotional state. It is my belief that this is what every child wants from their parent. All right, step 3 is called empathy. This is also 5 sentences long and is spoken with energy. The purpose of step 3, empathy, is to show your child that you're trying to look at the situation from your child's point of view. Again, this does not mean that you necessarily agree with your child. It's that you care enough to be interested in her perspective. Okay, here's how you could demonstrate that. And we're going to plug in the child's name, age, gender, complaint, and feeling. So you would obviously modify this for a child of a different age, gender, complaint, and feeling. So here's what we would say to Chris. You know, Chris, if I were a 17-year-old girl and I thought my mom beat me when I was a baby, I would be steaming mad too. You know, I'm really trying to understand our relationship from your point of view. I'm trying to look at things from your perspective. And if I believe what you believe, I would probably be feeling what you're feeling. I get where you're coming from. All right, now we're going to move on to step 4, which is called the minor correction. This step is called the minor correction for two reasons. The first is that it's minor in terms of energy. It's low key, blasé, nonchalant. It's very different than the high energy speaking of the first three steps. It's also called the minor correction because it's short. It should be one sentence. This is your opportunity to share your truth, your perspective with your child. Now, there are different versions depending upon the kind of complaint. If the complaint is 100% objectively false, such as you stole my college money and the money's still in the bank, then you would say, that didn't actually happen. Just like that, very relaxed. You're not saying, that did not happen. But most of the time, the accusation is subjective. So it wouldn't be appropriate to say, that didn't happen. So here are some alternatives. If the accusation is you didn't listen to me, you could say, oh, I thought I was listening. That's your truth. If the accusation is you don't love me, you could say, I know in my heart that I love you, because that's your truth. If the accusation is you yell and you don't believe that you do yell, then you would say, oh, I didn't think I was yelling. So I want to just go back for a moment. It's never okay, in my opinion, to say, you know I love you, you know I don't yell at you, you know I listen. This is your truth, and you have to speak from the I perspective. I thought I was listening. I didn't think I was yelling. Okay. If the accusation has anything to do with the other parent, you were a bad husband or wife, or it's your fault the marriage broke up, or you're causing pain to the other parent, anything to do with the other parent, you can use some version of, I see that differently, or I have a different perspective on that, or I have a different memory about that. No, the point is not to get into the details. Okay. Step 5 is a recap of gratitude, compassion, and empathy. All right, so you're just going to roll from 4 into 5. So let's say it's you stole my college money, and step 4 is, that didn't actually happen. But now we're going to go into step 5. I understand that you think it did and that you're very upset and angry about that. And I want you to know I'm so grateful that you're sharing this with me, because now I understand where you're coming from. Okay, so that's the 5 steps. If the accusation is relevant for the future, not just the past, like if the accusation is you yell at me, or you don't listen to me, you could end step 5 with an invitation. Like, I invite you to tell me anytime you feel I'm not listening, and I'll stop what I'm doing and I will focus more on trying to understand what you're saying. If the accusation is you yell, you could say, I invite you to tell me anytime that you feel that my tone of voice is too loud or too intense, and I will speak more quietly. So to recap, the 5 steps are for situations when your child is accusing you of something that is mostly, if not entirely, untrue. Now let's talk about how to respond if the child's accusation is at least partly true, or maybe mostly true, or entirely true. If that's the case, you don't want to spend 15 minutes going through the first 3 steps, 5 for gratitude, 5 for compassion, 5 for empathy. You just want to whiz through them to get to the part where you can apologize. So what I recommend is a modified 5 steps where each of the first 3 steps is 1 or 2 sentences rather than 5 sentences each. I'm just going to fast forward for a moment. Okay. Now I'm going back. Sorry about that confusion. I wanted to check my next slide. All right. So what I recommend is a modified 5 steps where each of the first 3 steps is 1 or 2 sentences each rather than 5 sentences each. So let's take as an example, the child says, you slapped me when I was 10. And let's say that actually happened. You probably don't want to say to your child, why can't you get over it already? I already apologized. Why are you making such a big deal about it? Did your other parent encourage you to bring this up again? It doesn't help to minimize or rationalize your behavior by saying, I only did that once. It's not such a big deal. Or, well, I did it because I was stressed. You don't want to do anything that justifies, explains, minimizes, rationalizes, or blames the victim, because that just emphasizes that you don't care. So again, this is what not to do if your child brings up a complaint that is mostly true. What I want to encourage you to do is a modified 5 steps. And this is what it would sound like. Chris, thank you so much for telling me that you're upset because you believed I slapped you when you were 10. So it's one sentence of gratitude. I can see how upset it's making you. And so that's one clause of compassion. And you know what? If I were a 15-year-old boy and I was remembering a time when my mom slapped me when I was 10, I might be pretty angry too. One sentence of empathy. All right, so you're sort of doing steps 1, 2, and 3, gratitude, compassion, and empathy, rolled into one very brief sentence. Okay, then you do an apology. So you would say, I remember it the same way you do, and I'm so sorry. Period. You do not explain, justify, rationalize, minimize, etc. The only exception is if your child asks you, why did you do that? Then you can respond, thank you so much for asking. I would be happy to tell you what was going on for me. But otherwise, you keep the focus on the child in the here and now. When you admit and apologize by saying, I see it the same way. I'm sorry that you can, and I'm sorry that I did that. Then you can add questions, engaging in what I call compassionate curiosity. You're asking questions because you care. So you could ask your child, what did that feel like for you at the time? Or what does it mean to you thinking back on that day now? Or is there anything else that I did that is so upsetting that you're still holding on to that? Remember, you're not asking questions to prove to the child that it wasn't really as bad as the child said, such as, well, did I leave any marks? Or can you think of any other time that happened? The questions aren't there to make the child see that she's wrong for being upset with you. The questions are there to show that you care, because presumably you do. So many targeted parents feel, why should I probe my child to explore and expand on her complaints about me? Won't that just make everything worse? My child is mad enough as it is. Why should I go there? And my answer is that there's a paradox here, and that when you go into the pain, you can heal the pain. So I don't know who's familiar with this toy, which I believe is called the finger trap. In this toy, you place a finger in either end of the tube, and then you try to get your fingers out. Intuitively, you pull your fingers out. But when you do that, the tube tightens and you get stuck. But if you actually move your fingers towards the inside, then the tube relaxes and you can get out. So I believe this is an apt analogy in that if you try to pull away from your child's pain, you get stuck. But if you move towards it, things open up and relax, and then there is a path forward. You can end this modified 5 steps with a wish, such as, if I could go back in time, I would do things differently, or I wish I hadn't done that. Or if I could do things over again, I would always show you love and respect, even when we're not seeing eye to eye. All right, so there's a couple final points I want to make about the 5 steps and the modified 5 steps. The first is, you might realize after the fact that you missed an opportunity to use the 5 steps. You're going to forget to use it. And this is hard. It's not intuitive, and it's a new tool that you're learning. Do not be too hard on yourself. None of this is obvious or intuitive. Fortunately, you can always go back to a topic and ask for a do-over. You can say to your child, hey, remember last night, last week, 10 minutes ago, whatever, when you shared that you were upset about Bob, blah, blah, whatever it was, and I responded by getting kind of defensive. That's not how I wanted to respond. What I really want to say is, thank you. And then you just go right into the 5 steps. Second, if your child accuses you of sounding different or like a therapist or a coach, please don't get defensive about that. There's nothing to be ashamed of. I recommend that you own it as a point of pride. You're darn tootin'. I sound different. I'm learning all sorts of new things to talk to you kids because nothing's more important to me than getting our relationship into a good place and being the best parent I can be. You should be proud that you're learning something new. Third, if you're worried that you'll forget the 5 steps, write them down on a piece of paper and refer to the paper when you're speaking to your child. You can say, I made some notes about how I want to handle it the next time you raise an issue with me. There's nothing to be ashamed of. You have nothing to hide. And finally, if you use the 5 steps a bunch of times, it's going to get weird and repetitive, So at that point, you could say to the child, you know the drill. First, I'm going to thank you and let you know, for letting me know what's on your mind. And I'm going to express gratitude. And now I'm going to say, now I'm going to pay attention to what you're feeling. So you can sort of label the step as you're doing it. So you can do the steps, but also acknowledge that your child probably recognizes that you have a method for responding to her complaints. Okay, now I think we're on to protection strategy 3, right? So the first was enhance the attachment. The second was don't take the bait, which had a lot of sub pieces to it. And now we're going to talk about fostering values in your child. And there are 3 values in particular that are relevant for protecting your child from alienation: forgiveness, compassion, and integrity. I'm going to explain each one, why it's relevant for alienation, and then offer some suggestions. So the first value I want to talk about is forgiveness. This is particularly relevant for parental alienation because, as I've said several times already, all parents are imperfect. All parents hurt, frustrate, and disappoint their children. And if your child comes to believe through the alienation efforts of the other parent that you have engaged in a behavior that is unforgivable, then your child is well on the road to becoming alienated. So the goal is not for you to be perfect, although that would be lovely. It's not really possible. The goal is for you to be the best possible parent you can be and to have a child who accepts you with your imperfections and is able to forgive you when you do something that hurts, frustrates, or disappoints the child. If your child believes that you have engaged in a behavior that's unforgivable, your child will become alienated. So here are some ways to foster the value of forgiveness in your child. The first is if your child naturally exhibits forgiveness towards somebody else, and you want to highlight it by using the word forgiveness and commending, praising, and appreciating your child for demonstrating forgiveness. For example, if you have 2 kids and one of your children was annoyed or hurt or angry or frustrated with their sibling and then forgives that sibling and does something nice for that child who earlier had been so annoying, then you can say to your child, wow, your sister was really bugging you earlier, but it looks like you've forgiven her and now you've decided to share your cupcake with her. I wonder how that feels for you. I know I'm impressed. So instead of saying to your child, oh, how nice of you, you're sharing your cupcake, or good girl for sharing your cupcake, you're being very specific about the value that your child is exhibiting and praising and recognizing and appreciating your child when your child demonstrates that value spontaneously. And certainly if your child forgives you for something you've done, you can acknowledge and appreciate and thank her for that. Let's say you promised to get Chinese food on the way home from work and you forgot or were busy or ran late or whatever. And you show up and you don't have the Chinese food your child really wanted, and your child says to you, oh, that's okay, Mom, I know you'll get it next time. You could say, wow, thank you for forgiving me. I'm really appreciating it. I'm noticing how flexible you're being. I'm so proud of you. Again, you're using the word forgiveness and thereby helping your child develop an identity as someone who has forgiveness in his or her heart. You can also talk out loud as you demonstrate forgiveness throughout the day. Let's say you're driving in the car with your child and somebody cuts you off. You could speak out loud and say, boy, that driver really irked me, but I'm going to forgive him. I'm not going to carry around anger because that just makes me feel badly. Or if you're watching a movie or reading a book together with your child and a character is struggling with the decision about whether to forgive somebody or not, you can ask your child, what do you think that character should do? Or what would you do if you were in that situation? If someone shows forgiveness towards your child, whether it's you or a sibling or a friend. Let's say it's you. You could say, I'm really upset that you did blah, blah, whatever it is, but I forgive you. I'm going to let go of that because that will feel better for both of us. And then you can ask your child, how does it feel to be forgiven? And acknowledge that the world is generally a better place when people forgive each other. The second relevant value is compassion. This is relevant specifically for alienation situations because alienation works when the other parent convinces the child, manipulates the child, tricks the child into believing that your feelings, the targeted parent's feelings, don't matter. And when your child believes that your feelings don't matter, that's a situation in which your child is much more likely to be harsh towards you or demeaning or contemptuous or not factor in your humanity when interacting with you or making decisions. You don't want your child to break your heart or treat you as if your feelings don't matter. So you want to foster in your child a belief that compassion is an important value. And you want your child to have an identity as someone who has compassion and values compassion. And the ways that you can foster compassion in your child are to recognize when your child spontaneously exhibits compassion and praise your child and appreciate your child. You can discuss your own feelings of compassion for your child. If your child looks sad, for example, you can say, I'm feeling empathic and compassion for you right now. I notice what you're feeling. If your child has an ethical dilemma about how to respond to a situation, you can ask your child to consider how to resolve the situation in a way that's compassionate towards the other person. You can ask your child for compassion by saying, I'm stressed right now. I need you to cut me a little slack. Can you have compassion for me? And again, if you see characters in books and movies engaging in compassionate behaviors or having dilemmas where they don't know whether or not they'll be compassionate, you can highlight that and discuss it with your child. And the third value that's relevant for parental alienation is integrity. And by that, I mean being true to your values and being true to your truth and what you believe and not being unduly influenced by somebody else to behave in a way that goes against your values. I think it's probably obvious how this relates to parental alienation. If your child has integrity, it will be harder for the other parent to convince your child that you don't love them when you do love them, or that you're unsafe when you're not unsafe, or that you're unavailable when that's not the case. You want your child to know who you are based on how you relate to your child, not based on what somebody else is telling your child about who you are. And you want your child to relate to you in a way that's based on the values of forgiveness and compassion. So integrity is very important to instill in your child. And the way that you do that, again, is to acknowledge and recognize when your child exhibits integrity, meaning is true to himself. For example, resisting peer pressure or studying hard when cheating would be possible, or being kind when there's no obvious reward to the child for doing so. But the child is doing it because that's what the child values. Anytime you see your child demonstrating what you would consider to be integrity, you can acknowledge that in the child. You can say, well, you have exhibited integrity right there, my friend. You could have gone a different way. You made a tough choice. It looks like you made the right choice for you. How do you feel about your choice? All right, so we're going to move on from values to the next protection strategy, which is teaching critical thinking skills. All right, so critical thinking skills is very closely related to the last topic, which is fostering integrity in your child. But critical thinking skills refers to a larger set of behaviors and attitudes and cognitive skills relating to try to figuring out what you believe, why you believe it's true, what's the evidence for you to believe that it's true, what would it mean for you to change your mind? Those are the kinds of questions that somebody with critical thinking skills will ask themselves. If your child has critical thinking skills, she will not be so easily misled to believe that you're unsafe when you're safe, or that you are loving, that you aren't loving when you are loving, or that you're unavailable when you're available. A child with critical thinking skills will not just believe what they're told, even if it's by a parent, but will have a filter of skepticism so that the child can match a belief or an idea with his or her own knowledge and experiences in order to determine whether an idea is plausible or not. So some ways to foster critical thinking skills include asking your child when your child makes a declarative statement, such as Coke is better than Pepsi, or it's a good idea to cram for a test, or who cares about being nice, it's a dog-eat-dog world, or any other declarative statement, rather than responding with, oh, that's a great idea, or oh, that's not true, and putting your 2 cents in, I'm recommending that you respond by saying, oh, what an interesting idea. How did you come to that? And asking that question in a friendly, open-hearted way. It's not about attacking the child or challenging the child or making the child feel that she has a ridiculous idea or a stupid idea. It's not about what you think of the child's idea at all. It's about you acknowledging that your child has an idea and being interested in how the child came to that. You're asking the child to share his or her thought process, not defend it. Another way to instill critical thinking skills in your child is to engage in mutual problem solving. If you and your child don't see eye to eye on something, whether it's allowance or bedtime or something like that, you don't want to take it's a my way or the highway approach, or, well, it's your life, do whatever you want approach. You could say to the child, gee, we don't seem to see eye to eye on this. You think X is a good idea, and I think Y is the better way to go. How do you think we can find a solution that feels good for both of us? And so you're showing your child there's 2 perspectives on a particular problem or situation, and you invite your child to brainstorm solutions. I want to be clear, I'm not talking about compromise, which is just splitting it down the middle. I'm talking about creative problem solving to come up with a solution that you both like. That process involves critical thinking skills, and it involves creative thinking skills, so you don't get locked into, well, I want bedtime at 11 and you want it at 10, so let's just compromise on 10:30. It's what will work for both of us. Another way to foster critical thinking skills is to ask your child to consider various options when she shares a problem with you. For example, your child might say, I'm going to fail my math test tomorrow. Instead of just saying, oh, that's not true, or, well, you should have studied more, or that's the worst thing ever, that's a catastrophe, we can't have that. Instead of you reacting to the information, you could start by saying to your child, what do you think about that? What's your plan? Do you have an idea about what you want to do? So you're inviting your child to think about choices and options. What are some things you could do since it's 6 o'clock now and your test is tomorrow morning? Rather than you telling the child what to do, you're encouraging your child to think up choices for him or herself, consider those choices, and that's all part of critical thinking skills, not just assuming you have to act a certain way or do the first thing that comes into your head. This is very important for inoculating from parental alienation. If one parent says to the child, you just call your mother and tell her she can't come tomorrow, or call your father and tell him not to show up at your soccer game. Much of the time, children feel like they have to do what their parents telling them to do, especially in the heat of the moment. But if you can help your child understand that in most situations there are choices to consider, then you can help your child figure out how to not always give in to the parental pressure to cut off or demean you or whatever. So you want to take advantage of opportunities to encourage your child to consider options rather than you telling the child what to do. Ask your child, what are some things you're thinking about? What are some approaches you are considering? What are the strengths and weaknesses of these various options? So I'm not going to give more attention to this particular topic because there's so much online about fostering critical thinking skills in kids. There's lots of fun books and activities and card games to work through with kids. But I do want to say that if you have an awareness that you're trying to foster in your child an ability to think about things, to think about thinking, then you can help protect the child against alienation, because alienation is really the adoption wholesale of the other parent's view of the targeted parent. And we don't want children to just adopt somebody else's view, even if it's a view you happen to agree with. In other words, if your child says to you, cheating is wrong, I'm not going to cheat, you might be relieved inside that your child's not going to cheat. but don't miss an opportunity to say, that's a fascinating idea. I would love to learn more about that. Walk me through how you came to that. And in doing so, you're teaching your child that conclusions don't just pop out of nowhere. They're based on values and belief and knowledge and facts. And you want to help your child make that connection so the child doesn't just one day say, you're bad because the other parent told him so. All right, the final protection strategy today is to invite criticism of yourself by your child. Rather than waiting for your child to be upset and then hope that your child shares what's on his or her mind, and then you have to go through the 5 steps or the modified 5 steps, you can try to identify and diffuse situations and grievances as they arise. And one way to do that is to be proactive and invite your child to share complaints with you on a regular basis. I doubt that a child will make up a grievance just to complain, so you don't have to worry that you're making the relationship worse by doing this. So one way to invite criticism that can be fun is to have a suggestion box in your home. And once a week, you crack it open and read all the suggestions. It doesn't mean you have to honor every suggestion. It's just a process of showing, hey, I'm interested in what you have to say. You could simply say to your kid, hey, honey, I hope that I never hurt, frustrate, or disappoint you. But if I have, I hope that you will let me know. Anything you'd like to share with me now? Or you could say, I've never been a parent of a 10-year-old before, which you can only say to your oldest. How am I doing? What could I do better? Again, you're not necessarily going to agree with your child about every complaint or suggestion, but you can certainly hear your child out, and it will help create open communication between you and your child, and it will allow you, hopefully, to nip grievances in the bud rather than having them fester. So I'm going to wrap up this portion of my talk here and end by saying that I hope this has been helpful and that everyone walks away with a couple of concrete suggestions and ideas about preventing alienation. Okay, topic 2. I'm going to turn now to this second topic, which is how to reach out to an adult alienated child. So now we're going to turn to what to do outside of legal action, how you can try to reach out to an adult alienated child. Once the child's over 18, there really is nothing legally you can do. So you can sort of continue doing whatever you're doing, but if you'd like to try something new, this is what I'm going to offer. I want to start by asking everybody to close your eyes. And I'm going to do the same, and I'm going to take a deep breath. And I want to invite you to imagine that you're standing on the bank of a river, and you can open your eyes and see the picture of the river right there. This is a turbulent river, and you are standing on one side of the river, and your adult alienated child is on the other side. And the river itself represents all of the hurt and anger that lies between you and your adult alienated son or daughter. And if you're like many other targeted parents, the actions that you've taken up until now represent you standing on your side of the river, sort of calling out across the river to your child, saying, if you knew my side of the story, you wouldn't be so hurt and angry with me. Perhaps you've even said, I'm sorry for anything or everything I've ever done that's hurt you. But that hasn't really worked, right? Because in keeping with our metaphor of the river, that's like, just screaming into the wind. It doesn't make it across. So what I want to do is describe to you a method of writing a letter that, in keeping with this metaphor of the river, involves you building a bridge, walking across that bridge and standing next to your adult son or daughter and looking back at the relationship from his or her point of view. Now, many of you, upon hearing this, will be thinking, why should I apologize for something I didn't do? Or I already tried that and it didn't work. Or I'm the victim here. Why should I be chasing my child? And I'm going to just try to answer each of those. So at first, at no point do I recommend apologizing for something you didn't do. I think targeted parents get trapped sometimes in this sort of binary thought process that either you prove you didn't do it or you have to apologize. But I believe there's this middle space that involves acknowledging your child's perspective without agreeing or arguing about it. And I'm going to get to that in a bit. The second concern is that what I'm recommending has already been tried. That's possible. However, I can say from personal experience that many people have told me over the years that they followed my letter writing, sort of template, and it didn't work. And then I asked them to send the letters to me, and it turns out they didn't really do exactly what I was thinking. This is very hard to do on your own. So you may think you did it, but maybe not quite. It's hard for these letters to not drift into explanations or victimization or blaming the other parent. So I have helped many people write letters, even after they told me that they already had written one, and the letter we worked on together is quite different. So this is something that I do in my coaching practice, and other people probably do it as well. And I do think it's worth trying to do with a professional, even if you've already done it yourself as a parent. The third concern is that it's unfair for the targeted parent who's already been so maligned and mistreated to have to do this really hard work of building the bridge. And I say, I absolutely agree. It is unfair, and you certainly don't have to do it. But here are the reasons to do it, even though it's unfair. You're the parent, and you generally have to make the greater effort in the parent-child relationship. You're older. You have more life experience, you're more wise, so it's fitting that you do this work. And you're the person who's most in touch with the desire to repair the relationship. Of course, you can keep doing what you're doing, and you can decide to try something new. It's entirely the parent's choice. I'm here to offer a way to think about doing something new. The parent gets to decide if that works for you. So you may be asking yourself, has it been successful? And I'm happy to share that it has been. I don't have a success rate. I can't tell you a certain percentage, but I wouldn't keep offering this as an option if it didn't work. But let's be clear, it's not a magic wand. Okay, here's a helpful image that I would like to offer to you now. And this is the mother bunny in the beloved book, The Runaway Bunny. And in this book, the baby bunny imagines various scenarios of running away. He's going to be a flower in a hidden garden, or he's going to become a sailboat. And in response, the mother never gives up, and she never gets her feelings hurt, and she never gets angry. She always responds with a loving message, like, if you become a bird and fly away from me, I will become a tree that you come home to. I love this mother bunny because she never gets offended or insulted by her child's desire for separation and independence. She maintains an unwavering positive image of her role in her child's life and is able to respond to his rejection in a loving and connected manner. Now, to be fair, I don't think in this story there's another bunny, parent bunny in the picture undermining her. So, of course, it's easier for her to stay compassionate and connected. But that is what's required of you. And I invite all targeted parents to channel their inner mother bunny or daddy bunny when thinking about writing the letter. So I want to be clear that the bridge that we're talking about building has to be built with love and compassion, not resentment. It's forged with the love you have for your child and the belief that your child still loves you, even if he or she can't admit it. The bridge is not a demand or an expectation for an apology from the child. It's not a demand that the child see and know the parent's side of the story. And it's not an expectation that the child will see the favored parent the same way the targeted parent does. There may never be a fully shared understanding of what happened. And it does not involve groveling and insincere contrition on the part of the parent for crimes not committed. That doesn't help. The parent who writes the letter has to stand by the letter at every step of the way. So you can't say something you don't believe. Okay, and again, the bridge is a heartfelt effort to see the relationship from the child's point of view. It's standing on the bank, the other bank of the river, and looking at the relationship from the child's perspective. All right, and it's an opportunity for the targeted parent to show him or herself to be safe, loving, and available. I believe there are many benefits to the letter. Again, it's a very loving letter, so it experientially counters the distorted message. It's helpful for the person writing the letter. Many parents say to me, after having written the letter, the letter may or may not work, but I feel differently about my child, because the letter induces compassion in the parent for the child. So it's helpful even if it ultimately doesn't change the way the child reacts. All right, I want to go through an example of the letter. I'm going to go through a lot of this a little bit more quickly than otherwise because I want to leave some time for questions. Okay, so there's 3 pieces of homework that have to be done before the parent writes the letter. The first is to make a list of what the adult child would say to a new friend. So what I say to the targeted parent is I say, imagine that Sally makes a new friend. And after about a month, the new friend says to your daughter, Sally, hey, Sally, what's the deal with your mom? Let's assume that mom is the targeted parent. How come you don't talk to her? Sally would not say, well, my father engaged in the 17 primary parental alienation strategies and fostered my unjustified rejection of my mother, right? Sally would not say, well, I'm psychotic and my behavior has no relationship to reality. Sally would not say, I don't know. Sally would not say, well, my mother slurps her soup and therefore I can't have a relationship with her. My point is that as a human being, adult alienated children, like all human beings, need to see themselves as good and rational people. And good and rational people don't cut off a parent for no reason or for a frivolous reason or don't even remember the reason. So Sally would be able to offer credible, plausible reasons to this new friend as to why she doesn't have a relationship with the targeted parent. They may not be truthful, they may not be accurate, but they're plausible sounding. And that's what I want the targeted parent to do, is to take that first trip across the bridge and look at the relationship from, let's say, Sally, the adult child's point of view, and say, what would Sally say are the reasons she doesn't have a relationship with me? And the targeted parent then, as the homework, is to take a piece of paper and write across the top, I don't talk to my mom because she ... And obviously, if the targeted parent is dad, it would be, I don't talk to my dad because he ... And then the list has to be written in the kid's point of view. So it would be, let's say dad is the targeted parent. He didn't pay for my college. He broke my mother's heart. He yelled at me all the time. He, wasn't supportive when I wanted to switch, high schools. He, whatever the kid thinks are the reasons the kid doesn't talk to the parent. I really belabor this when I'm giving the homework because most of the time when I ask the parents, then read me your homework, what they do is say, well, my child would say that, oh, nope, I want it to be the kid's point of view. Dad is a cheapskate. Mom didn't love me, etc. All right, so that's the first piece of homework. Many times parents will say to me, I don't know, they never told me, I can't do it. And I always push back and say, I believe you know. Think back to when the relationship fell apart, what was going on, who ended the marriage, who moved out of the home, what were the issues around favoritism, around money, around acceptance. Generally, targeted parents know. So that's a piece of homework. The second piece is a thought exercise. They don't have to write anything down, but they have to think about something fun they did with their child when the child was younger, and the fun thing happens to have a good smell attached to that activity. And then an example might be giving the puppy a bubble bath. That's a fun thing to do, and it probably has a good smell. Or it could be gardening. That's a fun thing to do, and it has a good smell. It could be baking chocolate chip cookies. That's a fun thing to do, and it has a good smell. Could be going to the movies. You walk into a movie theater, and you're hit with the smell of popcorn. Literally a good smell. And then the third piece of homework is finding a photograph of the child when the child was about 5, ideally looking happy and joyful. I warn parents, this is hard to do. It's painful to think about the grievances and look at pictures and remember good memories. So you want to sort of prepare the parent. Don't do it right before you have something important to do. You may or may not feel upset. So here are the components of the letter. I'm going to go through them quickly and then I'll give examples. So there's a loving greeting, then you acknowledge that there's a problem in the relationship, you express a wish for a better relationship, you present a vision for the future and an intention to see things. You explain, I'm going to see things from your point of view. Then you have 3 paragraphs. I'm going to go into all of these in detail in a minute. Then you have an invitation. You talk about that memory. You talk about the photograph. You have an ending. Those are the components. Here's an example. I'm using, again, the name Chris. So you want to start with a warm and loving opening. It's not just Chris, it looks like a business letter. Could be my darling son, dearest Chris, my sweet child. If you had a nickname for your child, Honey Bunny, you don't want to be too gooey and icky, but whatever feels warm. You want to signal to the child right away, I'm coming from a place of love. Here's paragraph 1. The intention is to acknowledge that there is distance in the relationship. So you could say, I've been thinking a lot about the distance in our relationship. It's been a long time since we've been close. Then there's a memory of holding the child for the first time. When I held you in my arms for the first time and I saw your little button nose and bright blue eyes filled with curiosity and your darling sprouts of hair, I was filled with awe and love for you. I imagined a lifetime of love and closeness when I held you. Never in my wildest dreams could I have imagined that we would end up where we are today with so much hurt and pain between us. So of course the parent has to tailor this with their description of their child and what their heart felt like. You want to weed out anything that's self-serving. I raced your mother to the hospital and I'm the one who cut the cord. And it's not about you doing, heroic feats. It's about the parent's heart, exploding with love and awe for the child. The next paragraph is wishing for a better relationship. I'm going to just sort of move forward. Then there's a vision for a better relationship, an acknowledgement that people work out their conflicts and their distances, and a hopefulness that that's what will happen in this relationship. And I encourage people to mention 2 people who had a falling out and worked it out, but not with any details. So here it just says, you may not know this, but Uncle Joe and Grandpa didn't talk to each other for quite a while after a falling out they had. Eventually they patched things up and they're glad they did. So there's nothing like details like Uncle Joe didn't talk to Grandpa when Grandpa cut him out of the will. And there's no blaming anybody. Finally, Uncle Joe, came to his senses and decided to be a good and loving son. And you don't want the parent to talk about a conflict they've had. Like, you may not know this, but Aunt Susie and I didn't talk to each other for 10 years, because then it looks like the targeted parent can't get along with anybody. Okay, then there's a brief statement that orients the child to where you, the targeted parent, are coming from. I'm thinking about our relationship from your point of view. I'm trying to understand what this relationship has felt like for you. What needs of yours weren't met? What feelings got hurt? What aspects of your personhood you felt were unseen by me? So this is where the parent is really showing the child, I am interested, profoundly interested in what our relationship has felt like for you. Now we go into 3 wonder paragraphs, and I'm going to move quickly. I know, you're not going to have time necessarily to read each of the 3 paragraphs, but I'm going to talk about the first one and then explain it. So what I do at this point when I'm helping somebody write the letter, when we get to paragraph 5, which is the first wonder paragraph, I ask the parent to read me their long list of grievances. That was the first piece of their homework. And then we work together to kind of lump them into 3 groups. Like sometimes there's a bunch about money, or there's a bunch about who ended the marriage and why, or there's a bunch about favoritism. And so I try to take the 3 most pressing issues. You don't want to leave anything out, but I think that 3 paragraphs about a grievance is about the right number. So you have to tell the story from the child's point of view. So here's what it could sound like. I've been wondering if you're still upset about my being the one to end the marriage. Now notice that here I'm using the word wondering, but if the kid has written to the parent, I hate you because you ended the marriage, then you wouldn't say, I'm wondering if you're still upset. You would say, I am aware that one of the things bothering you about our relationship is that I am the one who ended the marriage, right? It would be insulting and bizarre to say, I'm wondering if you know for a fact. And then you tell the story from the child's point of view. You were just a little child, just blah, blah years old. Here I pick 6. When this happened, it must have been so confusing for you to go from living with mommy and daddy together in one home to going back and forth between 2 homes and having mommy and daddy not get along so well anymore. So there's a couple of sentences where you're saying, I'm thinking about this situation from your experience. And then we ask questions. What was that like for you to know that I was the parent who chose to end the marriage? Did you feel that if I cared more about you, I would have made a different choice? Were there times when you felt particularly mad at me for making this decision? Were there times when the divorce was particularly hard for you? So there's at least 3, maybe 4 questions where you're saying, I want to know more about what this was like for you. And then you end the paragraph with a wish. If I could do things differently, I would try harder to understand what it felt like for you when the family changed. And I would work harder to make sure that you felt loved and safe, even though the family was going through such a big change. So the wish doesn't have to be, I wish I didn't leave your father, unless that's what you really feel. The wish is what you could have done better. So it can't be, I wish your father was a better husband so I wouldn't have to leave this horrible marriage. It's one element that you could have done better. All right, here's another example. I've also been thinking about your being upset with me because you believe I stole your college money. This is something that you've shared with me many times over the years. I want you to know I appreciate you letting me know what was bothering you, and I always want to be available to hear your concerns with me. And then there's questions. What was it like for you to think that I took your money? Did you believe I demanded to take that money away from you in order to hurt you or spite you? That must have been very confusing to you to think that I would want to take something away from you. So the parent is looking at it from the child's point of view. And one more, I'm also aware that you're upset with me because I did not agree to buy a horse for you with whoever the other parent is. And here's the story from the kid's point of view. That was such a painful time for you when you thought that Billy would be your horse, a dream come true. And then I had to be the one to tell you it was not going to happen. That must have been a crushing blow for you to have something almost happen and then have it snatched away. I imagine that you thought about Billy for a long time afterwards and felt upset with me for a long time. So again, it's showing I'm interested in what this was like for you. And then the questions, did it seem cruel to you? Did it seem that I was trying to hurt you and that I was selfish? And then a wish. I wish I had had the money to buy Billy for you. Okay, now we're going to go into an invitation paragraph where you say to your child, I hope that you can see that I'm trying to understand our relationship from your point of view. You are my precious child. My heart is filled with love. I want to hear what you have to say about what I've written about or anything else on your mind about our relationship. So you're inviting the child. You can respond in writing, on the phone, in person, whatever you want will be fine for me. Then we do the sense memory paragraph. This is the positive memory homework number 2, where you tell the child, and I don't actually love this example, but the point is you tell the child, I was thinking the other day about blah, blah, And then you know, whatever the memory is. So this one is, I went to the riverbanks of the park and I walked around. It looked so beautiful. I took deep breaths of that special combination of earth and water and trees and fresh air that you love so much. I have so many memories, wonderful memories of taking walks with you there. So you're evoking a positive memory of a positive time with the child. Ideally, you put in as many sensory details, which is why I don't know why I use this example. If it was one about going to a bakery, you would say, I walked by the bakery the other day where we used to go every, Friday afternoon to pick up cupcakes. You throw in a lot of details. When we would walk in, the smell of the butter and the sugar and the yeast was just the most wonderful smell. And those cinnamon buns were coming right out of the oven. Our whole senses were just delighted with the delicious, sweet aroma of the bakery. Then you tell a little story about the child. It was so adorable the way you would thoughtfully pick out cupcakes for you and your sisters. You always took time trying to think about which one they would like. So you're saying something positive about the child and then linking it to a special moment through that sensory detail. Then you talk about the photograph that you have. You say, I'm enclosing my favorite photograph. You tell a little story. So here it says you were just 6 years old. Your first baby teeth just came out. You were so adorable. So it's very positive. You're so cute and adorable and lovely. You say what's happening in the picture. There you are snuggling with Fluffy, your first pet bunny. Something positive about the child. You were so careful and loving when you held, Fluffy, so aware of how she was feeling, so concerned about keeping her warm and safe. Right? So you're saying something positive about the child's nature. And then you end this paragraph by saying, I have a copy of this picture taped to my refrigerator. And every time I go into my kitchen, I see your beautiful face and smile. Don't say I have a copy of this picture on my bed, nightstand, or in my bedroom, or on my desk. It's on my refrigerator, because food is sort of a symbol of nurturance. And it's the center, the heart, the hearth of the home. So you want your child to imagine you imagining him or her every time your child goes into his or her kitchen. Okay, and then you just want to end with a very, very loving message. I hope that the letter is the beginning for us. My door is open, my arms are open, my heart is open. Okay. Have someone read the letter. Make sure, if you do it on your own, I do recommend you work on it with a professional, but otherwise, make sure that it's not leaking self-pity. Make sure you agree with everything. Can you live with what was said? And make sure you're not leaving out any big issues. The ideal timing is to send the letter when the child's not living with the favorite parent. If the child's about to head off to college, wait till they're there. If the child lives with the favorite parent, send the letter during a time of day when they're likely not to be together. Send it as an email. Put in the subject header, I'm thinking about our relationship from your point of view. And then manage your expectations. An angry response is a good response. It means the kid's investing energy in the relationship. Thank them right away. And then get some coaching or help in how to respond. A good response is a good response. No response is the hardest. They might have just deleted it and not even read it. You might want to resend it in a month or two. Sometimes kids later say, that letter you wrote, but in the immediate aftermath, it's very hard not to hear anything. Okay, if you don't hear, I encourage you to continue to reach out to your child, cycling through various kinds of text messages, what I call Happy Tuesday, where you just say, hey, honey, it's Tuesday. I hope you have a great day. You can say, I love you. I want to make things right between us. You might want to provoke your child a little and say, you must be hurt and angry with me, and see if your child will respond. You can invite your child, sort of what I call a general invitation. Want to get together sometime? Or you could have a specific invitation. Hey, I'm swinging by Starbucks Sunday morning. Can I come by and bring you a Frappuccino? That's if there's no response. Okay. If your child responds angrily, consider it a good sign. and respond right away. Say to your child, thank you so much for responding. I'm going to think about what you have to say. And if it's a positive response, consider inviting your child to participate in Restoring Family Connections, which is a series of activities sponsored by a licensed mental health professional that help heal and repair the relationship. And this is an in-office program. It's not like an intensive, and it's 13 weeks of activities. Like, I'm going to just tell you there's a website where you can find out more. I'm not going to have time to go through them. If you go to my main website, you'll see on the homepage, there's a paragraph that says, Amy Baker's pleased to announce the creation of Restoring Family Connections. Click here, and you can click there and get more information. And I'm going to end right now. So there's almost 20 minutes of time for questions. So thank you so much.
Amy, thank you so much. I'm just trying to start my video here, which appears to be disabled, probably.
Want me to stop screen sharing?
No. Your screen is yeah, actually, yeah, you can stop your screen saving. I think my screen has been disabled by the technical department on our end. Let me just see if there we go. We're nearly there. We can't see your screen either at the moment, Dr. Baker. Have you got your video?
Yeah, my camera's not working, so we're just going to pass on that. People will just have to deal with my voice. Okay. I'm going to assume that you're going to moderate. You'll ask me questions, and I'm happy to do my best to answer. I do want to say, before we jump into this, it is tempting for people to ask specific questions. I have 3 children, and they're age 13 and 16, and I really can't give specific advice to specific parents without really knowing more. I do offer telephone coaching. It starts with me getting a bit of a background story on what happened. And then I'm basically tailoring my coaching strategies, the parenting strategies, the 5 steps, etc., to people's individual situations. But I wouldn't really be able to do that now. It's not really, I almost consider it malpractice to give somebody's individual level advice. So if people can sort of keep their questions maybe a little bit more abstract, not so tailored to their specific situation.
Two things on that, Amy. First of all, we're going to put, because the most popular question that's been coming in since you began your talk is, wow, amazing, so much information. How can I keep up? So there are a number of things that I'd just like to help people put their minds at ease. We will be setting up this entire video again as a YouTube video, so it can be reviewed later on. And YouTube, once it's published there, you can go to the 3 little dots at the bottom of the screen, and you can click print transcript, and that'll print out the whole conversation for you. The second thing is people are asking, does Amy have any books and that we can go through to refer to this? So amyjbaker.com is where... Hang
on. Amy J. L. Baker.
Oh, JL. Sorry, I only got Amy J. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Amy J. L. Baker. Let me just correct my notes because I might mention that again later on as well. But we will have a link from our website directly to Amy's as well, so that you can get into it from there. I'm going to start, Amy, if it's okay with you, with the most recent questions, because we received, gosh, I don't know, about 200 questions before this webinar even began. But those that came in most recently and therefore are most pertinent to your presentation, which I commend you on completely. And in fact, whilst I think of it, there is another presentation which might help people just before I get into all your questions, Dr. Amy, which is the Colette, if you can just roll it there, please. If you have can you put up on screen the info on the Dolce Vita project. There we are. This also might help people and ratifies a lot of what Dr. Baker has said, and a lot of the work in this workshop may also help people. So that's a 3-week workshop by our friends in the north of Ireland, La Dolce Vita project. So we'll also give you the details of that from alienated.ie later on. But so back to the questions at hand then. If your children no longer come for access and don't want to talk to you, what should you do? Should you persist with trying to ring or see them?
I would say absolutely, unless your child says to you, I'm going to kill myself if you text me again. I think you would look pretty ridiculous if you texted after that. If there's a restraining order, then obviously you have to obey that. If your kids are, of a certain age and the circumstances are such, and you have the time and money and resources, et cetera, you might consider going to court to enforce your parenting time. But if you're doing that, you certainly also want to look like you're pursuing your children. So, I generally recommend reaching out to your child every day and just saying, hey, how's it going? I love you. Have a great day. I notice you have a math test. Good luck. Oh, it's raining. I hope you have a nice umbrella, whatever. You're sort of commenting on whatever's happening in the child's life.
What about the letter, Dr. Baker? Would that be an appropriate time to consider a letter, and how might you structure that?
The letter is for adult alienated children. If you have a 7-year-old who's refusing to come for their parenting time, the letter would be completely inappropriate. You need a certain level of cognitive maturity. And look, the problem with the letter is that it is focusing on the targeted parent's contribution to the problem. And if you are thinking of going to court, I don't think that you would want to write a letter that sort of lays yourself out there, in such a vulnerable way. If your child's over 18, there's nothing the courts can do. You sort of have nothing to lose by writing the letter and saying, look, I think these are the things that are bothering you about our relationship. But if your kids are under 18, you are entitled to parenting time, and the kids are not coming. The first question is, what are your legal options? And at the same time, I would say you have to keep showing that you're interested, because let's say your kids are, 7 and 10, and the other parent says they don't want to come, and you're like, oh, okay, well, now you have basically voluntarily given up your parenting time, and then you can't, go to court and file a motion for contempt, because the parent has to be in violation of the parenting plan in order for you to file a contempt motion, and they're not in contempt if you've agreed to it. So
it may not be the case in the United States, where I know you're based, Dr. Amy, but many people on this side of the pond at this stage are of the opinion that the family law courts simply do not work. They're not fit for purpose, and pouring good money after bad into the pockets of this great big gravy train, as a lot of people see it, is insanity. Doing the same thing and expecting a different result. So court is, for many pragmatic parents, something that they just say, well, if court is the only option, I have no option. In those circumstances, as a parent who still loves the child and is simply being told, well, you can't see them because they don't want to see you, and the kids are, as you said, sort of young enough, 7, 8, 9, whatever, are there other options that people might be able to undertake?
Well, I don't think it's mutually exclusive. So I'm not pushing for court, by the way. I just want to be clear. What I encourage my targeted parents to do, mine meaning when I'm coaching somebody, is to really make a thorough cost-benefit analysis, like the pros and the cons, and not to make a reactive, decision. If you tend to be a sort of depressive, pessimistic person, you might think, oh, it's never going to work. And I don't want anybody to make a decision based on that. And sort of the easiest way to explain it is I will say to somebody, if your kids are 2 and you're a millionaire, go to court, right? Like you are ideally situated to go, and you haven't abused your kids, you have good evidence, etc. If your kids are 17 and you're broke and you don't have good evidence, don't go to court. The other side's just going to run out the clock. Most people are in the middle. Their kids aren't quite so old that the courts are going to say no, and they're not millionaires, but they're not broke. Then they have to ask themselves, what message am I giving my child if I go to court or I don't go to court? How will I feel about myself 10 years from now if I go to court, if I don't go to court? How will I feel about my financial resources if I allocate it to court versus to something else? I want to make sure that people are making thorough, rational decisions. So that's
but presuming that cost benefit analysis comes out can I spend the next 3 years' wages in court next week to try and increase my access? And it comes out in favor of, well, no, you can't, because you just simply can't live then, and you'll be done for and you'll be no use to anybody. Are there any practical steps extramural to the court process that parents can take?
Well, it does in part depend on your situation. I know cases where the kid is abducted and taken to, Singapore, and the parent lives in New Jersey, and the child doesn't have their own phone or email. I don't know, you could try to find a friendly person who lives near your kid who might say, hey, your dad's thinking about you. There are always things you can do.
Or mutual friends from before the separation of both parents, perhaps.
Some parents, again, if you're really, really stymied, like you don't have any internet access, you don't have any phones or text messages, you could create a website under your name. I don't think it's fair to do it under the child's name. I know some targeted parents do that.
That's a good idea. And then if they Google your name, up it comes.
Yeah. And it's nothing self-serving, nothing maudlin, nothing about parental alienation. It's not to convince the child they've been brainwashed. That's insulting. It's, here's some loving pictures of the 2 of us. Here's a poem I wrote. I'm thinking about you. You could do a little, every week you write a little thing like, oh, it's Father's Day. I wish we could be together. Oh, it's your birthday. I'm thinking of you. I bet you look so amazing. I remember when you were born, blah, blah, blah.
And just as a psychologist, when, I'm trying to think how an alienating parent might abuse something like that and use it against the targeted parent in court by saying, look, they're trying to emotionally blackmail the poor child by putting up this website and perhaps gain some traction.
Right. That's why it can't be maudlin or self-serving. Right? Anybody can say anything, but there are some definitions. Manipulation has to have certain elements. And for somebody to, say, I remember the day you were born. It was a beautiful day. You're the most delightful baby. I don't know. And you're not sending the link to the kid. It's they're searching for you. And this is what they're finding out. I think you would be on solid ground. If you have a question, ask your attorney. Am I going to get in trouble? I know targeted parents who take a billboard out, parental alienation is child abuse, in front of their child's school. That's not okay.
It's not okay. That's not a good idea.
Okay. No, it's insulting, and that is too intense. I know people who wanted to take out a billboard of the entire extended family in India saying to the child, we miss you and wish we could be with you. I think that's embarrassing for the kid, but it could be, there's usually a way to do it that would be okay and could be helpful. But you do have to think about it. If you have a question, you can consult an attorney. Could this be used against me? And consult with the psychologist. Is this manipulative? Because when you're in it, it is sometimes hard to tell if you're crossing that line.
And just on the extended family in India concept there, many of us might have fellow estranged, alienated parents, sisters, brothers, the kids' aunties, uncles, grandparents, etc., who don't see him anymore either. And I just wondered, would it be a good idea for them to go and knock on the alienating parents' door and saying, hey, you know, I'd really like to see my kids, my nieces and nephews, or my grandkids. Is it possible that something could be arranged? Presuming, of course, that email and phones and that are being ignored, as they usually would be in such a situation.
If they can comport themselves in an appropriate manner when they are frustrated, because they will be triggered, you know, most likely the alienator is not going to answer the door if they see that that person is out there, or they're going to be, you know, hostile towards that person. I think that the relative who's going to the door has to really be ready to manage their emotions so they don't make a mistake. Because if they do something wrong and it's captured on video, then it's like,
it'll make it worse.
That could make it worse. So it's not, in my opinion, almost everything, should I do X? The question is, how can you do X in a way that will further the cause? Not should you do it, yes or no. How should I email? How should I text? How could I do a billboard? How could I do a website that would spark in the child the experience that the targeted parent is safe, loving, and available?
And that's a tricky one, isn't it? Especially when you're emotionally involved. I'm keen to, though, just to get back to some of the other questions that have come in, Dr. Amy, if I may. As a targeted parent, prior to learning about parental alienation, made all of the mistakes taking the bait from the alienator. Now my son is an adult and wondering if there is any way to have a counter effect on having fallen into the trap 14 years ago. Son has not communicated anything whatsoever following being taken and brainwashed. So I have no idea what I'm being accused of. There's no contact or dialogue, all guesswork. No loving communication has been answered in 14 years. So clearly communication is being sent. How can somebody possibly do something productive there?
I would have to know more, because I know there are times when parents say to me, I don't know what's upsetting my child. But then when I hear the story, and well, what happened when your child was taken? Oh, well, I actually went away for 3 weeks on a business trip, and then I came back and my kid was gone. Okay, so maybe the child thought that you abandoned them or whatever. I don't know in this particular case, but every alienated child feels rejected by the parent they are rejecting. They believe every alienated child experiences the targeted parent as unsafe, unloving, and unavailable. And I do believe that most of the time, the targeted parent has some idea of what it is. And usually when I hear the story and then they do the homework and we find something to write about in the letter. I suppose there could be some scenario where the person literally has no clue, but I think usually there are seeds of suggestions about what the kid is holding on to. And then that would be the focus of those 3, what I call wonder paragraphs in the letter.
Okay, good advice. Thank you for that. The next one is, if a child is severely alienated, do you continue to attend sport and school events when a child tells you he or she does not want you there?
All right. I do want to say I have to end after this question, right? Because we're at the top of the hour, the end of our time together.
Appreciate that.
What I would say is I would want to know more details, so I'll try to sort of think it through. If you can still show up and not cause a scene and not go to the kid and not wave to the child and not badmouth the other parent and not stir up chaos and in the audience, then you should still go. If the child says, I'm going to, quit basketball if you show up, I think you would probably at that point say, look, I really value, I know how much you love basketball. I don't want you to quit on my behalf. I'm going to hang back for a while. I'm not promising I'm never going to show up for a game, but I'm going to make this concession. You can't be so rigid in any rule. Always show up, always do this, never give up. I mean, yeah, in general, don't give up. In general, show up. But there could be scenarios where you have to make some concession to show that you care about your child. But in general, if the kid just says, don't show up at my baseball practice, and as long as other parents are showing up, if you're the only parent, you know, because in general, parents don't show up except for games, then yeah, I wouldn't do it because then you're going to stand out. But if you can do it in a very low key way to signal to the kid, hey kid, I'm the parent and I'm going to make this decision, and I'm prioritizing showing you that I love you, even though I hear you that you're saying you don't want me to come, then I think you should show up. But I can imagine a scenario where I would recommend the opposite if I knew more details.
And indeed, and every case, of course, is different. Dr. Amy Baker, it's been absolutely fascinating. And thankfully, we have this recorded and available to review, because there's just so much in there and so much valuable information touching really for the first time on the area of what you do as an alienated parent and what you can do to assist your children in need. Dr. Amy Baker from Alienated Children First in Ireland and all of our friends around the world, thank you so much indeed.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I am going to sign off. And I hope that everybody walked away with something helpful.
Dr. Amy Baker. And just to let you know that we do have more webinars, of course, coming up. Our next one is with TV star and psychologist Dr. Richard Hogan. That's on the 11th of November. Oh, there you have them on your screen. Thank you, Colette. Followed by Karen Woodall in January, and Dr. Philip Marcus, Judge Philip Marcus in February. So 3 more very, very interesting and exciting webinars coming up. For the moment, though, as I say, this webinar will be live at some stage overnight or tomorrow. All of the details that you heard today can be found there. The entire webinar can be watched again via alienated.ie. But for now, for myself, Kenn Joyce, and all at Alienated Children First, and everyone who helped today and got involved, thank you so much. Goodbye.